A failed attempt at extortion became a legendary event that altered the course of hundreds of lives in an unprecedented way, making it the most remarkable event in Millbrook Shielded's history. After finally finding solace tending to his organic crops, a former Special Forces Master Chief was thrust into the spotlight when the infamous Steel Falcons biker gang picked the wrong victim. However, what began as an aggressive confrontation transformed into an unexpected tale of atonement, altering the lives of the hunter and the hunted, and transforming vicious offenders into defenders of the very society they had formerly tormented. Ethan Cooper meticulously plowed his organic vegetable rows while the morning mist lingered in the fields. He checked irrigation lines with the same quiet efficiency as he checked tactical gear, his strong figure moving with quiet efficiency. He had learned to rise early, maintain vigilance, and double-check everything throughout his 20 years as a Special Forces Master Chief. "Ethan," it was morning when the sound of Martha Thompson's voice echoed across the field. The old woman approached him, toting her usual tray of freshly baked muffins and coffee mugs. "I was wondering whether you were going to be hungry for breakfast. Yet again, you've been out here since before the sun comes up." Ethan stood taller, his palms drying on his faded jeans. "These muffins would have been perfect for Rachel, Martha. You're treating me." When he thought about his late wife, his voice lowered. "It seems like someone needs to watch out for you. I must protect you from your mother's wrath." Placing the basket on an adjacent workstation, Martha lowered it. "Plus, no one else ever gives me a hand with my roses but you. It is my garden that will be competing this year." The low growl of motorbikes reverberated throughout the Shielded as they ate their breakfast. A look of worry crept into Martha's face. "They've returned. Once again this week." Ethan kept his cool and finished his coffee in a systematic fashion. "Steel Falcons are becoming more daring. According to Sheriff Wilson, 3 farms in the neighboring county have been damaged. Refusing to pay their protection money, Mike Anderson had his leg broken." Subtly, Martha spoke. For many years, his family has owned and operated the feed business. Sales are now on his mind. The sound of the motorcycles increased in volume. Ethan assisted Martha in collecting her belongings. "Get back to your house. I'll see this through." Martha sprinted to her car while warning Ethan Cooper not to be scared by the goons. Just as she began to back away, a group of 12 motorbikes surged up the gravel road leading to Cooper Farm. Wearing black leather adorned with steel raven symbols, their leader, Shadow Mitchell, made an intimidating impression. He looked out over the lush fields with a contorted smile on his damaged face. "You have a very nice setup here, farmer." After Shadow yelled out, he turned off his engine. Too bad it got lost or damaged. As they dispersed, his 11 buddies trampled saplings underfoot. With his hands relaxed at his sides, Ethan stood silently. His posture betrayed his extensive martial experience to anyone with the right eyes. But the bikers saw him as nothing more than a helpless farmer who was about to get his due. "Your lovely farm is protected for $5,000 a month," Shadow added while donning heavy gloves. "If not," he trampled a tray of young plants. "Mishaps do occur." Ethan whispered that those roses belonged to Martha's opponent. 2 of the motorcyclists exchanged wary looks, even though his words didn't contain any threats. Shadow failed to perceive. "Her plants, the old lady's. Perhaps it would be a good idea to also visit her. She might make us some delicious muffins, I bet." A small hardening of Ethan's eyes occurred. One final opportunity to depart silently. Things start to get tricky after that. The motorcyclists burst out laughing. With a thick chain in his grasp, Shadow encircled his fist. "Come here, boys, and show Farmer John what happens when you disobey the Steel Falcons." The first to act was a motorcyclist named Brick, who swung a lead pipe over Ethan's head. However, Ethan had departed. He skillfully evaded the blow and struck Brick in the wrist to incapacitate him, using motions refined from innumerable combat operations. Brick joined the pipe, panting for air, before it even hit the ground. What on earth? The biggest motorcyclist, Ghost, sprinted forward. Ethan acted like a wave, guiding Ghost's speed into a nearby trough of water. The large man came to his feet gasping and startled. A look of fury crossed Shadow's face. "Kill him, Wrench." "Hawk." With blades out, the two surviving motorcyclists slowly encircled Ethan. They coordinated their attacks in the hopes of overwhelming him. Rather than helping each other, their teamwork backfired as Ethan knocked down the other with one of his momentum. Shadow watched in shock as his men writhed on the floor. "Farmer, you're dead." He made a lethal arc with his chain. The deftness with which Ethan caught it with a single hand was a testament to his extensive training. That is also the position taken by the Taliban. He pulled Shadow off his feet by yanking the chain. That was a mistake. After that, the altercation stopped abruptly. 12 members of the infamous Steel Falcons were found seated in Ethan's rose garden, each bound with their own bike chains, when Sheriff Wilson arrived 5 minutes thereafter. "Hey there, Cooper." A sigh was emitted by the sheriff. Just couldn't let go of the thrill overseas. Ethan had previously transplanted the seedlings of Martha's roses. Dave and Martha were endangered. I simply could not allow that to remain. It was only the start, though. It was completely unforeseen how this one confrontation would lead to a tale of forgiveness, restoration, and surprising camaraderie. Not only would the farmer's life be forever altered, but the lives of every single person in Millbrook Shielded would be profoundly affected by the monumental undertaking that he was about to undertake. An extraordinary adventure was about to begin, one that would show that sometimes the best wins aren't won by vanquishing an opponent but by transforming them into an ally. It all began with a humble farmer who yearned for the tranquility to cultivate his roses. The news of the altercation at Cooper Farm quickly traveled across Millbrook Shielded. The calls from worried people and reporters attempting to confirm the reports would not stop coming into Sheriff Wilson's phone by sundown. One farmer managed to apprehend 12 members of the notorious Steel Falcons gang, who had terrorized no less than 3 counties. Shadow Mitchell, in addition to his wounds, nursed his battered pride at the county prison. Marcus Hawk Reeves, his lieutenant, overheard Shadow spitting out commands over the cell phone. "Gather everyone. I would prefer it if that farm was destroyed by fire by dawn." As Hawk observed the other Steel Falcons congregating at their warehouse hideout, he approached Boss and proposed that perhaps we want to give this some consideration. "This farmer doesn't seem right. Am I being interrogated?" A menacing tone crept into Shadow's voice. The Steel Falcons were embarrassed by that man. Not many people can say they did that and survived. All of the parts were moving. An entire community would be changed by a series of events that began with a basic act of defense. But first, there would be betrayal, distrust, and the formation of strange alliances in the unlikeliest of places. It was almost time for the actual fight for Millbrook Shielded to start. Deputy Sarah Chin documented the incident through photographs at Cooper Farm, while Ethan tended to the aftermath of the altercation. "When the other Steel Falcons learn about this, Mr. Cooper, you must take protection." "Deputy, I am grateful for your concern." With military precision, Ethan continued to transplant Martha's wounded flowers, interrupting gently. "Not a problem for me." Sarah refused to give up. "There are at least 30 more gang members in the world, sir. They have a history of responding to insults. Just because the Petersons refused to pay protection money last month didn't stop them from burning down their farm. Then perhaps someone should confront them." Sarah noted that Ethan's eyes were continually scanning the horizon, evaluating sight lines and possible approach routes, while his voice remained calm. A typical farmer would not act in such a way. Sarah informed Sheriff Wilson of her findings upon returning to the station. "There seems to be an issue with Cooper, Dave. His movements and ability to defeat 12 armed guys demonstrate that he has received extensive training." The sight of a secret folder on Wilson's desk caused him to sigh. "Sarah, it's best to keep some things to yourself. Please be informed that our concerns do not extend to Ethan Cooper. Even though Ethan begged her to leave the farm that night, Martha would not budge. At his kitchen table, she obstinately arranged roses that had just been cut. My flowers were under danger from those bullies. Plus, someone must watch your food intake. Outside, a truck drew up. A local veterinarian named Dr. Alice Martinez, who was Rachel's best friend and the husband of Ethan, rushed in. I recently heard, Ethan. Feeling all right? She looked over him for wounds in a flash. No worries, Alice. Took the day off to take care of the garden. Ethan forced a half grin. Upkeep of the garden. Everyone in town is raving about how you defeated half of the Steel Falcons by yourself. She spoke more softly. The rumor mill has it that Shadow Mitchell wants vengeance. Silently, Ethan told him to come. However, his tone caused the women to look at each other anxiously. Pastor Michael Roberts, at the community center, was coping with the devastation in his own unique way. For months, the Steel Falcons had been frightening his congregation and extorting funds meant for church fundraisers in order to pay for protection. The local business owners were summoned to an urgent meeting by him. As Mike Anderson argued from his wheelchair, we must not abandon Ethan to confront this challenge alone. With his injured leg up, the Falcons will return with a vengeance. But then what? It was asked of Frank Turner, the hardware shop employee. They are murderers. All we are is farmers and store owners. Introspective thought betrayed Pastor Roberts. Perhaps that has been the issue we've faced throughout. It's just the two of us. Now is the moment for us to unite. Come on, we need a break. Give us the location from where you're watching. If you're interested in this type of stuff, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow we have a really special story in store for you. The Steel Falcons assembled in large numbers at their warehouse as darkness descended. More than 30 motorcycles formed a line while Shadow detailed his strategy for retaliation. But Hawk's concern persisted. He had served in Afghanistan, and there was a familiarity in the manner Cooper had battled. Demonstrating his phone to Hawk, Ghost urged him to have a look. He had been researching Cooper's past. Following the death of his wife, Guy relocated here 2 years ago. Acquired the farm through a family member. Yet before to then, there was complete silence. He seems to have vanished. Before we take action against this farmer, Shadow, we need additional information about him. With a piercing cry from his gut, Hawk sent a warning. We are well informed on all matters. Scarlet snarled. We lost him. We will demonstrate to Millbrook Shielded tonight the consequences of disobeying the Steel Falcons. From his concealed location behind the warehouse, Martha's grandson Tommy watched. In his pursuit of knowledge that could aid Ethan, he had pursued the motorcyclists. Upon learning of their intentions, his pulse quickened. However, just as he was about to slink away, a twig broke beneath his foot. To what did that refer? Boom! Went Brick's voice. Verify the outside. As he sprinted, Tommy's shoes crunched under him. Motorcycles started up behind him and roared to life. This was familiar territory for the lad, but the bikes were much quicker. The group was closing in on him, but headlights showed him the way. As Tommy was about to give up, a pickup truck he recognized materialized from a side road. A door for the passenger swung open. Under Ethan's order, go inside. As Ethan flawlessly executed a protective driving move, Tommy leaped into the truck, blinding their pursuers with a cloud of dust. Tommy observed the irate motorcyclists come to a sudden halt in the rearview mirror. If you knew, how? Still feeling his heart race, Tommy let out a gasp. You were acting suspiciously at dinner, Martha said when she called. Ethan spoke in a steady tone, but he couldn't take his gaze off the mirrors. You showed a lot of courage there, Tommy. Ignorant yet courageous. According to Tommy, they're planning to show up tonight. The farm will be destroyed by all of them. Unsurprised, Ethan gave the signal. I see. That's why I'm counting on you to assist me in ensuring the safety of everyone. Lights began to switch on throughout the town as news of the approaching confrontation spread, and the truck veered toward it. A night that would alter the course of history was about to unfold in Millbrook Shielded. Not the possibility of an invasion by the Steel Falcons, but the ability of a single ex-Special Forces soldier to defend a whole town from their wrath was at stake. Little did anyone know that this fateful night would unleash a chain reaction that would either shatter Millbrook Shielded or transform it into something beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Defending a farm wasn't the only thing at stake, the community's own essence was at stake as well. The lessons of resilience, atonement, and the genuine essence of brotherhood that the hunter and hunted would discover in the following hours would reverberate through the ages. As Ethan spoke to the assembled locals, the ancient church basement buzzed with anxious energy. With his men arranged around the structure, Sheriff Wilson stood guard near the entrance. The faraway sound of motorbike's engine rumble intensified outside. Ethan ordered everyone to remain in this area until it was over in a voice that exuded subtle authority. Your safety will be ensured by Sheriff Wilson and Deputy Chin. But they're coming to burn your farm, Mike Anderson objected. The culmination of all your efforts. Ethan said that structures can be reconstructed. Fate cannot be saved. He looked directly into Martha's dogged eyes. Without a doubt, Martha, you as well. Martha stood up and said, fuck that. Should I absolve you of this responsibility, Rachel will hold no sway over you. By the way, I have freshly brewed coffee in your kitchen. Almost a grin flashed across Ethan's face. Get the coffee later. According to Martha, that coffee isn't going to suit you. Even the worst evildoers require some time to reflect after a good battle. Having someone listen and a steaming mug of coffee can be just what you need to end a conflict. Everything was in place. No one could have foreseen the profound impact that this night would have on Millbrook Shielded and Salvation when Ethan ventured out into the darkness. Sheriff Wilson drew Ethan aside when they were outside. Do you have any doubts? Within the next hour, I may arrive with the state's finest security forces. Ethan, who was looking at his watch, responded that an hour was excessively long. This must conclude this evening. These people have endured enough terror, Dave. Reluctantly, the sheriff gave a nod. I thought we were finally done when you moved back here. Indeed, I did the same. Ethan glanced up at the sky as it began to darken. We don't always get to pick our fights. Their choice is us. Ethan returned to Cooper Farm and proceeded with precision and speed. His getting ready could have seemed weird to anyone looking. He wasn't erecting barriers or boarded up windows. On the contrary, he appeared to be randomly arranging agricultural machinery, tweaking irrigation systems, and setting up work lights. The Steel Falcons, meantime, had assembled at their designated staging spot. At 40 strong, Shadow's assembled force was the biggest gathering of the gang in years. So, this concludes tonight. The roaring engines muffled Shadow's voice. Cooper degraded us and made us appear feeble. No one will dare oppose the Steel Falcons when we finish with his farm. But Hawk picked up on something strange. Some of the veterans were uneasy, but their most aggressive members cheered. It was a familiar expression. He had seen it many of times in the reflection. Those were the features of men who had witnessed more bloodshed than they could handle. Shadow gave the command for Ghost Brick to approach from the east. Hawk's squad storms in from the west. I would like that area to be encircled. Hey, boss, Hawk said. There seems to be an issue. My sources tell me that Cooper is still there, by himself, even though he has had hours to clear out. Understood, Shadow smiled. Facilitates it. With his military instincts raging, Hawk adamantly refused. This raises suspicions. No sane farmer would remain to confront 40 armed guys on his alone. Hawk's collar was seized by Shadow's wildly extended hand. Again, you're interrogating me. Hawk retorted, "I'm fighting to keep us alive. I did my best to accommodate Shadow, Cooper's movements, and his arrangements for us. He is more than just a farmer." "To hell with it if he's Superman," Shadow snapped at him. With a shout, the motorcycles dashed into the night, dividing into their own groups, and he was no more than a corpse by midnight. While observing with his binoculars, Hawk remained in the background. There has been a shift in the arrangement of the farm. There were peculiar shadows cast by the work lights, and the tools were nowhere to be found from earlier. In the church, Tommy was unable to remain motionless. "It is our duty to lend him a hand." His shoulder was touched by Martha. "Little one, observe and absorb." On occasion, the most subdued individuals posed the greatest threat. The deputy's expression turned frowny as she scowled at her radio. "According to the reports we're receiving, the Steel Ravens warehouse has been the site of explosions." Wilson shot back that it couldn't be done. "They are en route to Cooper's farm with all their men." "Not all of them," Tommy said with a smile. "I may have told one farmer where they store their fuel." Ethan listened in his barn, which was darkened, as the motorcyclists approached back at the farm. He was inspecting machinery that had nothing to do with farming as his hands moved mechanically. His time in the Special Forces had left him with permanent muscle memory. The irrigation pipes he had moved were hit by the initial group of motorcyclists. The mud made their bikes slide. Ethan was able to remain hidden by using the carefully positioned work lights, which blocked their night vision yet cast long shadows. Amidst the chaos, the dispersed sound of shadows resounded. "Track him down." However, Ethan was already in motion, appearing as a shadow amid others. A mysterious assailant was gradually disarming and incapacitating the motorcyclists. "I have extensive understanding of the farm's layout in addition to years of expertise in special operations." "He's tearing us to shreds," someone yelled out. From his vantage point on the road, Hawk noticed the pattern. "Uncle of A. Tactical sweep formations are being used by him. The guy is in the military." Out of his wrath, Shadow seized a gas can. "Put it all on fire." Unfortunately, the can was full of water when he attempted to sprinkle gasoline in the barn. The explosion in the warehouse had wiped out all of their gasoline supplies. In search of this? Emerging from the shadows, Ethan raised a fuel cap and called out. "Keep your supply lines protected at all times." Mistake in basic strategy. As he whirled around, Shadow fired his weapon aimlessly. The shot missed its target, and in an instant, Ethan was there, effortlessly disarming him. With his arm pinned behind him, Shadow discovered himself face down in the muck. "Are you aware of the most significant error you made?" Ethan spoke softly. "The protection racket, not this one. Endangering my farm in no way." Martha felt threatened. "The VA hospital gets her coffee weekly. Evidently, it affected a few of your own men." Less than 20 minutes later, the battle was ended. Sheriff Wilson discovered 30 motorcyclists restrained and seated silently in the barn upon his arrival. All were treated for minor injuries sustained while receiving nursing care. 10 more had run into the darkness. What followed, though, was the event that would permanently alter Millbrook Shielded. The ensnared steel birds sat in a peculiar stillness within the barn's cozy illumination. Their energy for the battle had faded. A blend of hay, motor oil, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Ethan interacted with them in a very different capacity than that of a captor. They suddenly asked them questions, checked on their wounds, and offered drink. "So, you were a part of the 75th Regiment, huh?" Noticing a faded tattoo on one of the younger members, Ethan decided to ask. "Had 2 stints in the Afghan War." Crying out loud, the motorcyclist shot his gaze skyward. "You did what?" "Your movements during the battle. The Ranger's style is unique." A mug of coffee was presented to him by Ethan. "The city of Kandahar. The region of Helmand. As Ethan counted the number of veterans among the detained bikers, similar discussions began to take place around the barn. 12 in all, including Hawk, who observed the conversations with increasing clarity. What started off as a night that would ruin Cooper Farm was soon to turn into something very different. The start, not the finish. Maybe this is a chance for those wandering warriors to return home. There's more to you than meets the eye. The last piece is fitting into place, Hawk finally said. Fields as a kill zone, lights to confuse, and cut off of supplies, that's how you set it up. It's a tactic used by special forces. Whispers ceased in the barn. Shadow, who was still restrained but was now perched on a bale of hay, abruptly lifted his head. Armed services. In a low voice, Ethan verified. After 20 years. Master Chief retired. As a reflex, a number of the more seasoned members stood up straight. Bearings used by the military return automatically. Evaluate his strategy in relation to the brick. Turning to face his fellow veterans, Hawk continued. A tactic used by the special forces to neutralize an enemy. And the terrain's used to his advantage. We were really outclassed, man. Ignoring Ethan's irritated expression, Martha decided then was the time to go into the barn. With her, she dragged a big wicker basket lined with checkered fabric. If you guys are finished attempting to torch my friend's property, I've brought sandwiches and coffee. What a ridiculous moment. A grandma provides refreshments to gang members who have been apprehended. Released the stress. Some motorcyclists even found it funny. It was Ethan who made the first move. Leave it be for the moment. She interrupted him. According to Rachel, if no one reminded you to eat, you would forget. Then she started handing out paper plates. Plus, according to my grandchild Tommy, a few of these lads are veterans. Under my supervision, no veteran will go hungry. Several motorcyclists shifted uncomfortably at the mere mention of Tommy, as they recalled earlier pursuing the child. On the other hand, Martha pretended to be the coffee server at a church event. An elderly motorcyclist named Mrs. Thompson raised her voice. The incident with your grandson earlier is deeply regretted. I can start making up with you by drinking my coffee. Martha gave a forceful response. Who would like a sandwich now? Upon his arrival, Sheriff Wilson was met with an eerily realistic scene. Photographed two motorcyclists, Ethan and Hawk, enjoying a sandwich while they reminisced about their time in Afghanistan. Jim summoned Dave and invited him over. I believe we could find an alternative to putting more people in your prison system. Pay attention. Among the group, Ethan signaled to the veterans. Deep down, these men aren't bad guys. They are fighters who strayed from the path. Discovered an incorrect form of fraternity. Slowly, Hawk nodded. The warlike Falcons. Having each other's support was the intended theme. Under Shadow's leadership, the focus shifted to fear and intimidation at some point. Is that so? What do you think? Wilson inquired of the assembled congregation. The seasoned motorcyclists nodded in unison. Many of the newcomers appeared to be giving serious consideration. They hold sandwich platters and coffee mugs. Continued by Ethan was his proposal. I am presenting a chance to those who are willing to change and seek a better way. Help is needed on the farm. In addition, I am aware of additional veterinarians who are in need of assistance. Individuals who can empathize with your situation. Dark scowled. If you think you're insane. Shadow, be quiet. Hawk interrupted him abruptly. Just be quiet for a change. To Ethan, he turned. Just what is it that you're selling? A set of instructions. Various tasks. A therapeutic component. In any case, the VA has been nagging me to start one. Get some agricultural experience under your belt, seek out some professional treatment, and perhaps figure out how to put your brotherhood to better use while you help repair what you attempted to ruin earlier. The deputy, who had been watching in silence, finally spoke up. We could incorporate it into a rehabilitation program, Sheriff. Versus sentencing. Clean records are given to those who finish. A nod from Wilson indicated agreement. Others who aren't. As soon as he heard the news, the young ranger joined. Numerous others started to nod in agreement. What a bunch of wimps. Shadow attempted to stand, but his hands were too tightly gripped. You can't call the Steel Falcons a support group. Yes, Hawk did agree. Brotherhood is meant to define us, but we've lost sight of that. He turned to Ethan. This offer could be useful to other veterinarians as well, so please consider it seriously. Men who are almost in love with us but haven't quite made the leap just yet. To see how the wounded motorcyclists were doing, Dr. Martinez showed up. She spoke softly to Ethan. This would bring Rachel great pride. That is precisely her course of action. Ethan hesitated when his late wife was brought up. In Rachel, a second chance had always been an option. That's why she backed his plan to transform the property into a therapeutic center. The night progressed, and ideas started to form. Sheriff Wilson contacted the district attorney's office. Dr. Martinez volunteered to work with counselors from the VA. As if it were second nature, Martha continued to pour coffee and serve sandwiches. All 12 Steel Raven veterans and 25 other members had taken Ethan up on his offer by daybreak. Although Shadow and his most ardent adherents would be subject to legal action, the bulk of the gang had other plans. Hawk mentioned the necessity for a new name as the sun began to rise. Steel Falcons must go if we are to undergo a transformation. In spite of his grandmother's objections, Tommy secretly returned to the property and proposed the idea of the Garden Warriors. Despite their protests, the ex-motorcyclists had grins on their faces. Over the course of that all-nighter in the barn, something had changed. Thanks to Martha's sandwiches and Ethan's unassuming empathy, a new form of brotherhood was emerging. Nobody in Millbrook Shielded could have foreseen how this peculiar evening would alter the course of their lives or the life of everyone else in the town. The anticipated conflict had transformed into something much greater, an opportunity for atonement. Starting with the belief of one former Special Forces member that anyone, given the correct environment, could transform their heart, everything came to fruition. Rumbling motorbikes shattered the early silence, 1 week following the altercation at Cooper Farm. However, their purpose this time around was to construct rather than demolish. 20 ex-Steel Falcons, led by Hawk, sped up the gravel drive, their motorcycles shining in the early morning light. I still can't believe we're doing this, Brick said, appearing uneasy in his absence of his signature leather vest. As he beheld the charred remnants of their former warehouse, Ghost reminded him that it was better than jail. Besides, following Shadow's demise, everyone had heard that 2 days following the barn incident, Shadow and his devoted followers attempted to attack Ethan in the neighborhood cafe. Timed to the second, the altercation was brief. As Ethan collected himself to finish his coffee, Shadow suffered a fractured jaw and received a 5-year prison term. Ethan stood calmly yet vigilantly near the barn, ready to go. So happy you succeeded. Assuming everyone had breakfast. These were sent to us by Martha. Hawk raised a basket. Mentioned the importance of providing healthy nourishment for growing boys. Without a doubt, she did. Ethan faintly grinned. The damaged fields must be cleared first. Your bikes ripped up a lot of dirt. Despite the difficulty of the task, the soldiers persevered. They had anticipated severe punishment and tough discipline. Rather, they stumbled across an unexpected discovery. With due regard. Ethan did his best to work with them, guiding and instructing instead than dictating. Oh, look at these rose plants. Ethan showed how to replant correctly. Everything is revealed via the roots. You must learn to interpret the signs, just as in battle. Get to the bottom of things. Towards the middle of the morning, Dr. Martinez showed up to schedule the initial therapy appointment in the repurposed barn. Rank them in order of priority. Clipboard in hand, she inquired. Hawk moved forward as the men nervously exchanged looks. Think I fit the bill? Set an example, will I? Deputy Chen's patrol cruiser showed up just as Hawk slipped into the office. For the rehabilitation program, she had been designated as the liaison. Hey, how's everything doing? Ethan said, better than expected, as he watched Brick demonstrate to Tommy how to measure the pH of soil. Essentially, they were fighters who only needed a fresh objective. At about midday, the local news crew arrived, captivated by the peculiar sight of ex-gang members toiling away on a farm. Ethan was reserved, but did let them take a few shots. He told the press with conviction that these men need privacy as they try to put their lives back together. Thanks to his congregation, Pastor Roberts brought lunch with him. He made the announcement after the church council had voted unanimously in favor of the program. For veterans in need of accommodation, we are transforming the former youth center into a dormitory. The change went beyond the physical. There were tales that emerged while the guys farmed the land. Before his PTSD led him to the gang, Ghost worked as a battlefield doctor. After 3 tours of duty left Brick ill-equipped to adapt to civilian life, he lost his family in a divorce. After experiencing short-term solace through aggression and coercion, each had sought camaraderie among the Steel Falcons. Hawk remarked, "It's strange," while taking a drink of water. Thought we were free as gang members, but in reality, we were merely constructing yet another jail. Mike Anderson, whose leg was still in a cast, returned from the feed store that afternoon. Everyone clenched their jaws as they recalled that they had shattered it. However, Mike merely rolled himself up to the brick. "This is where you were a mechanic," he remarked harshly. "Someone has been yelling at my delivery truck. Do you wish to have a look?" We started to get more visitors from the neighborhood. Maria Gonzalez delivered tamales prepared by herself. The Steel Falcons had formerly preyed on her property. Men who are hungry can't think clearly, according to my dad. While preparing an unannounced banquet in the barn, she made the proclamation. The former motorcyclists were perplexed by the level of acceptance. No one had anticipated hostility and terror, much less offers of free meals and jobs. Why are they acting in this way? Understatedly, Ghost spoke to Ethan. In response, Ethan stated that this is the essence of community. I felt better after returning to this village for my final visit. It is now up to you. Martha and Helen Wilson, the sheriff's wife, arrived with further meals as night fell. Helen said that the ladies' auxiliary wanted to lend a hand. The veteran housing program will be supported by a fundraiser that we are planning. I never imagined I'd live to see today. As Sheriff Wilson observed his wife discussing her renowned peach cobbler with ex-gang members, he made a statement. "Ethan, are you certain about everything? Those guys aren't terrible, Dave." Simply became disoriented. Ethan took a moment to reflect, recalling the challenges he had faced upon leaving the Special Forces. Returning home from a battle can be the most difficult part. Intent, the sheriff gave a nod. The trial of Shadow will begin next week. Although his most ardent supporters face harsh punishment, the district attorneys have agreed to consider alternative sentencing for those who successfully finish your program. The guys got ready to go as the sun went down. Unexpectedly, they had achieved more in a single day. First counseling sessions were finished, damaged fields were cleaned, and new seedlings were planted. Hawk inquired, "Same time tomorrow," as he wiped perspiration off his face. "At first light, you will find Ethan here. Also, Hawk, you should inform the others who are still undecided. Help is available if they desire it." Ethan and Martha sipped coffee on their balcony that night after everyone else had left. Subtly, Martha remarked that Rachel would be incredibly proud. She had this dream as well, didn't she? Turning the farm into a therapeutic haven. Looking out across the fields, Ethan nodded. It was there that their erstwhile adversaries had spent the day learning to build instead of destroy. She insisted that second chances should be extended to everyone. Regardless, Martha got to her feet and retrieved her empty basket. In my opinion, you've made a solid beginning. Those boys bring back a flood of memories of your first days home. Feeling disoriented, furious, and longing for direction. Ethan stated that these folks are good. Someone should kindly remind them of that. Ethan looked at his phone as Martha drove away. 2 of the 5 former Steel Falcons who had texted to inquire about joining the program had been offered jobs at Mike Anderson's feed shop, and 5 more had done the same. A shift has begun to take place. All they needed was some time to mature. 30 motorbikes swung into Millbrook Shielded, causing chaos, just 2 weeks into the rehabilitation program. A rival gang from the neighboring state, the Death Riders, had learned of the Steel Falcons' seeming frailty. Hawk rode up quickly to the farm as Ethan was instructing a group of veterans on irrigation systems. Problems, major ones, have arisen. A band of goblins? Ethan inquired in a composed manner, but he had already begun to examine the horizon. At this very moment, they are threatening Brick and Ghost at Mike's feed store. Our management change became public knowledge. Hurry up and return everyone to the farm. The leader of the Death Riders, the towering figure known as Crusher, was confronted by Brick and Ghost at Mike Anderson's feed store. After leaving the Steel Falcons, both had been employed there for a week in a legal capacity. Crusher scowled as he threw a display of feed sacks on the ground. "Look at you two," he said. As they pretended to be store clerks and received honest wages, Steel Falcons transformed into steel puppies. "Crusher, Brick warned you to stay out of it. We've had enough of that existence. No one is finished until we declare them to be." A tool wagon was knocked over by Crusher. Even though Shadow is behind bars, the protection payments from his deals are still due. While his legs healed, Mike Anderson continued to wear a brace as he rolled himself out of his office. "I own this land. Flee the scene before I notify the authorities." Then Crusher let out a laugh. "Grandpa, feel free to call anybody you like." Whispers from behind them carried Ethan's assurance that they would be here by the time they arrived. Deputy Chen, Sheriff Wilson, and Ethan were standing there as the Death Riders turned around to see them. Additional townies and ex-Steel Falcons were being pulled up in cars and trucks behind them. "You have no place being involved in this, farmer," Crusher scowled. Sure enough, Ethan took a step forward to confirm. "These guys are on Mike's payroll. He's a friend of mine, Mike. Thus, it becomes my concern." At his gang, Crusher cast a glance around. 30 people, including yourself. Those odds appeal to me. Sheriff Wilson made a comment when other vehicles pulled up, suggesting that you double-check your calculations. Not only were dozens of townies showing up, but so were former Steel Falcons who had enrolled in the rehabilitation program. Martha, who usually carries a wooden spoon, was also present. "Did you really leave the Steel Falcons for this?" Stoner made fun of Brick and Ghost. Assisting a hometown hero in a game of farming? "No," Brick said, his posture unwavering. "We departed because we discovered an alternative to fear. Our lives were given meaning. And community," Ghost chimed in as he stepped forward to stand by Ethan's side. Crane's expression turned gloomy. "Every one of you has died." He tucked his hand under his coat. What followed became yet another legendary tale from Millbrook Shielded. Ethan, whose famed speed in special forces was on full display, outpaced Crusher before he could even draw his weapon. After losing his weapon, the enormous motorcyclist collapsed to the ground in a heap. "Our conversation will be civilized about territory and respect," Ethan remarked in a conversational tone while retaining his grip on Crusher. Sheriff Wilson's officers retreated from their strategic positions, their rifles drawn, and the Death Riders froze as they swung their weapons around. Even more crucially, they were encircled by reformed bikers and resolute citizens who were standing shoulder to shoulder with them. "Listen up, folks." With his voice echoing around the room, Ethan went on. "There is more to Millbrook Shielded than meets the eye. Your protection racket isn't targeting these individuals. Friends of the people I call family. We are a family. Hawk squared his shoulders and advanced. Nodding, the other ex-Steel Falcons followed suit. So now you're faced with a decision, Ethan continued. Please depart immediately and notify others that Millbrook Shielded is off limits. He increased the pressure just a little, causing Crusher to gasp. We can carry on with this conversation at the sheriff's office. The decision is yours. Nobody budged for an anxious second. Afterwards, a Death Rider accelerated his bike and rode away. Others swiftly followed suit. Crusher was the only one left after a short while. I understand. An exhalation of breath was made by Crusher. We've left. You own Millbrook Shielded. Ethan helped him to his feet while keeping a tight hold on him, correcting him. Whoever lives in Millbrook Shielded is a part of it. Keep it in mind. Mike Anderson approached Brick and Ghost as the Death Riders withdrew. That lunch break was definitely action-packed, guys. It seems like you were keeping track of inventory. The anxiety was released by the nonchalant return to normalcy. A large number of people still made their way to Martha's residence as others scattered. She had announced a last-minute dinner party. As the sun went down, the barn on the property was full. During Dr. Martinez's group therapy session, former rivals sat together and shared Martha's food. Some veterans were shaken by the appearance of the Death Riders, who brought up previous traumas. Grasping a weapon was very close. The Spectre confessed during the session. It came from the gut. Ethan, though, informed him that he hadn't. So you went in a different direction. To me, that is paramount. As he savored Martha's pie, Sheriff Wilson drew Ethan aside. Your program is getting the word out. 3 additional counties contacted me to inquire about the process of setting up a comparable system. Ethan asserted that the program was not his. This is everyone's property. The actual labor is being done by these individuals and this town. As Ethan peered around the barn, he noticed that Brick was instructing Tommy on engine maintenance under the watchful eye of Martha. Hawk and Mike Anderson were planning a security firm run by veterans. Pastor Roberts and Maria Gonzalez were planning a community garden. As they joined them, Deputy Chen made a comment. I was impressed by your defeat of Shadow and the Steel Falcons. But this, she pointed to the situation there in front of them. Here we have the true triumph. Ethan sat on the stairs of his porch late that night, after everyone else had gone home. The encounter with the Death Riders had demonstrated something significant. These folks had undergone genuine transformations. They had opted for their new community instead of their old ways when tested. He was joined in his seat by Hawk, who materialized from the shadows. Very eventful day. Ethan admitted that things may have turned out terribly. However, it failed because you demonstrated that we should not fight for ourselves alone. Hawk stopped. It was the other people's wish that I inquire with you. Our group's name has been up for discussion. A watershed moment occurred during the gathering the following morning at Cooper Farm. The barn had become their de facto headquarters, and the erstwhile Steel Falcons had gathered there. Shielded Brotherhood, Hawk declared. That is the name we would like to give ourselves. As they celebrated their new identity, Ethan observed from a distance and saw the joy on their faces. The guys had ditched their worn-out Steel Falcons patches in favor of plain black vests. According to Brick, there should be no ostentatious logos. Because this shielded provided us with roots at a critical time, the only intimidating symbols are the words, Shielded Brotherhood, and a wheat stalk. Deputy Chen, who was there for the announcement, gave a thumbs up. After that, I will officially register it with the state as a real organization. More than just names were changed. Mike Anderson's feed store now employed 4 additional veterans. 2 others were being instructed by Maria Gonzalez in the ways of organic gardening. Frank Turner, who owned a hardware business, had even taken on a couple. "Ethan, do you have an issue?" Sheriff Wilson showed up, appearing worried. "Do you recall the 3 counties that expressed interest in replicating your program? Personnel are being dispatched today." "Many individuals." "For how many?" "There are 5 sheriff's departments, a dozen social workers, representatives from the VA, and..." Wilson was uncertain. "Roughly 30 gang members who are interested in going to rehab. Your actions with the Death Riders became widely known." Then Ethan massaged his temples. "Our existing program is already cramped." Wilson went on to say that that was not all. The news spread. "The focus here is on national networks." It seemed as if the cars were waiting for them. As they peered out the barn door, they beheld a procession of vehicles making their way to the property. Last but not least were news vans. They may be seen from a distance by their satellite dishes. A basket of muffins from Martha materialized, though. "Lucky I baked a little more." The hours that followed were a complete and utter disaster. Concerned law enforcement officers from adjacent counties sought information regarding safety measures. As far as counseling techniques, social professionals were interested. Reps from the VA met to discuss potential sources of funding. And the news outlets were keen on filming every detail. More intriguing, though, was the arrival of the remaining gang members. Some were former Steel Raven comrades, and some were competitors, from various factions. Everyone was eager to experience Millbrook Shielded's miraculous change for themselves. "Just as you mentioned," Hawk informed Ethan while they observed the newcomers. Bewildered warriors. They merely required an ally to illuminate an alternate route. In the main field, Ethan rounded up all of his followers. There were now more than 100 people in the gathering. There was a mingling of government officials, journalists, interested citizens, and ex-gang members. Ethan spoke directly to them, "Just so we're clear. You won't get out of your legal problems any easier or faster with this. This is a labor-intensive process. It's about restoring people, not merely farms or businesses." The Shielded Brotherhood were signaled by him. A shift was made by these men. They put in constant effort to regain confidence. During treatment, they confront their traumas head-on. They get fresh abilities. Locals benefit from their efforts. There is an alternative if you are not prepared to make that kind of commitment. No one departed. At that very moment, Ethan went on. "First things first, please excuse everyone who is here with a camera. As they begin to put their lives back together, these men deserve space." Sheriff Wilson and his officers firmly escorted the reporters to the property boundary despite their protests. A newsman made an effort to argue on behalf of the public interest. Ethan informed him that the focus of the public should be on effective rehabilitation rather than reality television. They require time and space to recover. After the shutterbugs rolled, the serious labor started. Intake interviews were organized by Dr. Martinez and the other counselors. In regards to housing, Pastor Roberts cooperated with churches in neighboring counties. Frank Turner and Mike Anderson discussed vocational education and training programs. As the newcomers arrived, the Shielded Brotherhood stepped in to show them around and explain the program. Their life stories shaped them into ideal role models. "Do you see that field?" Brick shared the news with a gathering. "Only a week ago, it was filth. These days it's all about flowers. This is their specialty. Restores life to decaying objects." The town's leaders, including Margaret and Helen Wilson, planned a huge welcoming feast. It was moving to see formerly incarcerated persons eating lunch with police and community members. "Thought I'd never see the day when ex-rivals work together to set up tables," Chen said as he watched. At dusk, Ethan and Hawk enjoyed some peace and quiet. "Do you understand what this implies? We will require additional room and supplies." "Already handled," the Hawk grinned. A vote was taken by the Shielded Brotherhood. We're giving the program all of our confiscated assets, money, properties, you name it, so it can grow. According to Ethan, that's a lot of money. Money for blood, Hawk said. Finally, it did something useful. The remaining few met in the barn later that evening, after the most had departed. A plethora of blueprints, housing developments, training programs, and counseling schedules were displayed on flip charts. "Look at the blueprints," Ghost remarked, "it's expanding beyond us." In response, Ethan emphasized his point. When we assist one individual, they often go on to assist others. The day's silent observer, Tommy, finally spoke up. "Did you get the meaning of this? Like you helped us, the Shielded Brotherhood may be helping people all across the world." They looked at each other. Word of their redemption began to spread, guiding others to a place of restoration. It had an impact. "Do one thing at a time," Ethan warned. "We must ensure that these new arrivals are treated properly first and foremost." Finally, Martha produced the last pie. "Then I guess it's time to go going. I pray that you all are prepared for the long days that lie ahead." While dividing up the pie, they discussed future actions and responsibilities. There was more to the Shielded Brotherhood than a loose confederation of ex-riders. Something greater was taking shape of them. An example of transformation. A guiding light for those who are also lost. The trial period for Shadow was winding down, 3 months following the program's expansion. Since Ethan's testimony was pivotal to the prosecution's case, the courtroom was jam-packed as he took the stand. The prosecutor, Mr. Cooper, started. "Testimony regarding your contacts with the accused and the Steel Falcons is requested." From the defendant's table, Shadow sent a sneer, but Ethan kept his cool. "They showed up at my farm and demanded payment for protection. They threatened physical force when I declined. And you, a mere farmer, were able to overcome a group of armed assailants." Shadow and Ethan locked gaze. "Master Chief of the Special Forces is my retired rank." The situation was everything but straightforward. The courtroom was thrown into chaos by the revelation. The quick summary of 20 years of classified activities for the court caused Shadow's cheeks to become pale. Once they were subdued, the prosecutor went on. "To individuals who were ready to change, you extended an offer of rehabilitation rather than prosecution." "I knew exactly what they were, so the answer is yes." Disappearing fighters in search of fresh purpose. Multiple cell phones captured the events of that night, despite Shadow's lawyer's attempts to cast doubt on Ethan's testimony. Ethan said little more than, "They chose to leave peacefully," when questioned about the Death Riders incident. Construction on the expansion had already begun at Cooper Farm. With their surrendered assets, the Shielded Brotherhood had bought nearby homes. 50 veterans in recovery were accommodated in new dormitories. Every day, counseling clinics and training institutions ran. As soon as Ethan got back from court, Hawk informed him that there were issues at the Northfield. The newcomers fought. Gang feuds from the past are dying out. After Ethan arrived, he saw Brick and Ghost had already separated 2 factions of ex-enemies. "So, you're looking for a fight?" "Brick," he said. "Then go ahead and direct it correctly." "They had put up a boxing ring," he said. "No way out of the program unless you wear gloves and work under supervision in that room." The guys appeared embarrassed. Someone spoke out. "2 years ago, they murdered my friend." "Did you also murder any of their friends?" Silently, Ghost inquired. "Everyone here has blood on their hands. The question is, are you planning to pile it on or remove it?" With time, the tension eased. Members of the group dispersed, each going to a distinct task. "Good handling," Ethan remarked to Ghost and Brick. "This is becoming easier for you." "Got my education from the top," Ghost said. In other news regarding education, we have received official recognition of our program from the VA. My goal is to make it a national model. Dr. Martinez was coordinating with counselors from 3 counties inside the main barn, which had been turned into an administrative center. She said that the trauma-informed approach is effective. They find purpose in their healing process when they combine treatment with physical work. News of Pastor Robert's most recent outreach to the neighborhood was brought to his arrival. Both the corporate groups and 4 other churches are interested in sponsoring rehabilitation programs and increasing the number of employment placements. The Shielded Brotherhood were now considered indispensable members of the town. In the case of a natural disaster, they maintained an emergency response team and ensured the safety of local events and the homes of the elderly. Do you recall the days when we would terrorize locations such as these? While eating lunch, the hawk lets out a meow. We are now safeguarding them. Some shocking numbers were revealed by Deputy Chen, who was reporting from the sheriff's office. Across 3 counties, the crime rate has dropped by 60%. Other gangs are either seeking rehabilitation or are considering quitting. The entire area is being transformed by you. However, with success came new difficulties. Ethan convened a meeting of the immediate sort that night. In the barn, there was a conglomeration of officials from the Shielded Brotherhood, local government, the VA, and the police. "We're in a sticky situation," Ethan started. Quickly disseminating information. "The number of requests is outpacing our capacity, and there are others attempting to replicate our program without fully comprehending its inner workings." Attorney General Wilson gave a little nod. "We have received allegations of 3 rehabilitation organizations that are actually frauds attempting to take advantage of families in dire need of financial assistance. Also, other gangs are acting like they're reforming in order to get information," Hawk said. 10 men last week who were clearly plants had to be turned away. Dr. Martinez said that organization is necessary. Authentic validation, instruction for program managers, and inspection of product excellence. We talked for hours. The program's formalization, training protocols, and verification mechanisms were all part of the original plan. The Shielded Brotherhood would go on to become trainers, passing their knowledge on to other communities on effective gang member rehabilitation programs. Ethan explained that it's about more than just granting individuals second opportunities nowadays. The key is to get it correctly. It only takes one hiccup for all our hard work to be ruined. Tommy, who had essentially taken over the role of official photographer for the show, presented them his most recent work. Cooperative effort by former adversaries. Recovery for veterans. Changing neighborhoods. The thing I see, you know. As Martha studied the photographs, she wondered. Optimism shines through. What these men are doing is more than just changing. Their example is proving that it can be done. Ethan strolled his fields late that night, after everyone had gone. The once silent farm was now a symbol of progress. However, they faced much greater difficulties in the future as the Shadow's punishment drew near and copycats threatened their work. Hawk accompanied him on his stroll. The attorney for Shadow came up to me. "You asked me to attest that the use of force was excessive. Negotiated a price. Advised him to push it aside. A fresh code is now available to us." Hawk surveyed the lit-up structures where formerly incarcerated individuals were establishing fresh beginnings. "Nothing we constructed here is smaller than Shadow. Beyond our comprehension." Ethan gave a knowing nod. They had sowed the seed of change, and now it had blossomed into something truly extraordinary. They needed to keep an eye on it, give it some TLC, and make sure it spread correctly now. In a low voice, Ethan mentioned that Rachel would have adored this. The farm, she declared over and time again, could cure people. Her accuracy was unnoticed. All of that changed during Shadow Davidson's sentencing hearing. As he rose to deliver his closing remarks, the entire courtroom went silent. However, he displayed a burning wrath in his eyes rather than regret. "Think this is finally over?" In a growl, Shadow turned to confront Ethan. "Things didn't start with the Death Riders. Even in the shadows, I have pals. Your little farm straight out of a fairy tale is under danger. A 15-year prison term was handed down by the court. But it was too late. His remarks set in motion a series of circumstances that would put the Shielded Brotherhood creations to the test. After a 2-day absence, Ethan saw Hawk preoccupied at his office just before sunrise. Confirmation has been obtained. Shadow was being quite serious. An army of demon kings is forming. Ethan became more stern. There was no group quite like the demon kings. They had ties to other states and operated as an organized crime group. For how many? Somewhere over 100 authors. Even yet, it's far from the worst aspect. Hawk relinquished a file. Our other rehabilitation institutions are also in their sights. Out of the blue. With the help of the Shielded Brotherhood, 5 satellite programs were set up in other counties. Dozens more veterans attempting to start over lived at each facility. In a moment of urgency, Sheriff Wilson convened a meeting. Joined by leaders of the Shielded Brotherhood, law enforcement officials from 6 counties swarmed the barn. According to Wilson, intel indicates coordinated assaults. Their goal is to dismantle all that you have accomplished. Make it clear that rehabilitation is an impossible ideal. Allow them to come, Brick rumbled. But Ethan put up a hand. What Ethan meant was that this had nothing to do with fighting. We must ensure the preservation of our creations. With their second opportunities, these men put their faith in us. Their expectations will be met. Dr. Martinez raised his voice. Around the country, 87 veterans are now participating in rehabilitation programs. Resilience is an ongoing challenge for many. Controversy has the potential to derail months of treatment. Deputy Chan further by saying that we would lose community support if this escalated into a war. With his special forces expertise coming to the fore, Ethan meticulously examined the tabletop map. The satellite centers must be evacuated. Gather all of them here. More than 200 individuals, including employees and their families, were mentioned by Pastor Roberts. Shall we store them somewhere? Martha, standing in the doorway, proposed the idea of the church camp. The heads of the class cocked. Her arrival had gone unnoticed. Currently, it is vacant. There are a lot of cabins, and the security is decent. It can be reinforced by my construction crews, Frank Turner said. Acquired all necessary materials and lumber. There was military accuracy in the movement of the Shielded Brotherhood. Truck convoys were covertly moving participants in the rehabilitation program within hours. Supplies were supplied by local companies. The residences of community members were opened. Ethan oversaw operations from the farm, which doubled as their headquarters. As he looked on, he saw old rivals banding together to aid evacuees, secure homes and businesses, and set up communication networks. Breakers and outlaws collaborating is something I never expected to witness. 2 opposing gangs, Ghost said, whose members had both undergone rehabilitation. Hawk said that they are no longer considered breakers or outlaws. Now they are known as Shielded Brotherhood. By the time night fell, everyone had escaped. A fortified sanctuary had been built out of the former church camp. Boundaries were set by the local police. Ethan understood that the establishment of patrol routes by the Shielded Brotherhood was merely the first step. He informed the executive team that they will attempt to isolate us. Turn us into the aggressors. Weaken the community's support for us. According to Deputy Chen, who was checking her phone, it has already begun. The internet is ablaze with speculation. They're making us out to be an enemy gang and accusing us of being the troublemakers. It was time for Ethan to take a stand and reveal our true selves. Operation Community Shield was initiated the following morning by the Shielded Brotherhood. Businesses in the area started receiving free security guards from teams of reformed veterans dressed in their new uniforms. Many others lent a hand to the elderly by fixing up their homes. In underprivileged communities, medical teams provided free health screenings. Their efforts were covered by local media. Feedback from families affected by the program's success was overwhelming. Publicly, their efforts were supported by churches and civic organizations. Can you perceive the result of your actions? While Ethan was watching the news, Martha informed him. You didn't only instruct them in a new style of combat. You showed them a new way of life. However, the demon kings were far from done. Across town, 3 flames of questionable origin broke out that night. Dark figures were seen near the school as first responders hurried to deal with them. All was set for the Shielded Brotherhood. Police and teams of reformed veterans stopped the would-be bombers in their tracks before they could detonate their bombs. The footage clearly shows that the Demon Kings were going after unsuspecting citizens. During their nightly briefing, Sheriff Wilson stated that they are attempting to instill fear in the neighborhood. Persuade individuals to back us out of fear. Afterwards, we will demonstrate to them the true essence of strength, Ethan responded. Ethan stayed at the property that night to keep watch as the Shielded was rocked by thunder. I was familiar with the stillness before a tempest. As a Special Forces soldier, he'd encountered it on numerous occasions. Hawk went on patrol with him. When I was a member of the Steel Falcons, I mistakenly believed that being strong meant instilling terror in others. I get it now. The key is to earn their trust. The Shielded was illuminated by lightning, and with it came hundreds of flashlights coming from all directions. It was the arrival of the Demon Kings. The worst challenge they had faced thus far was about to come as the storm broke. Both in terms of their dedication to change and their capacity to protect what they had created. Not winning a battle was the question, but winning without reverting to their old selves was. Millbrook Shielded was bathed in an unsettling light from the hundreds of oncoming headlights. As the Demon Kings encircled the area, Ethan observed from his strategic vantage point. They were more numerous than their IQ would have you believe. In the neighborhood of 200 bicycles. No units failed to check in. Whispering into his radio, Ethan said softly. Thanks to the brick, the church camp is safe. Everyone participating in rehabilitation is safe. Covered the town's perimeter. Verified Spectre. Shielded guards and police are ready. The community center has been secured. Assistant Chen chimed in. On standby are emergency services. An individual referred to solely as the judge, who was the commander of the Demon Kings, approached the main entrance of the farm. The judge's icy logic stood in stark contrast to Shadow's reckless aggression. A basic, twisted and fractured scale of justice was the only patch on his leather cut. The sound of the judge's words resounded across the grounds, Harrison. Stand before your verdict. Stepping into the light on his own, Ethan maintained an air of nonchalance that concealed his true combat readiness. Seems a bit theatrical, doesn't it? By transforming us from fighters into farmers and from predators into prey, you have sabotaged everything that we stand for, the judge growled. No, Ethan responded placidly. I escorted wayward guys back to safety. Substantial contrast. At the judge's signal, his mounts began a menacing engine revving. One final opportunity. Put a halt to your programs, return our people, or face the consequences. Who are you? An eyebrow was arched by Ethan. No, they are not possessions. A better route was chosen by these men. War is the next option you consider. Ethan actually cracked a small smile. My vote goes to this. All throughout the Shielded, lights suddenly burst into flames. Community members, rather than police or soldiers, encircled the Demon Kings. The Shielded Brotherhood were supported by hundreds of townspeople. Routes for escape were barred by farmers on tractors. Obstacles were made by church buses. Workers in the construction industry set up makeshift barriers. You see, Ethan went on, as you were amassing your army. The true meaning of fraternity was being demonstrated to these individuals by us. Dozens more horsemen, concealed by the Demon King's armor, abruptly dismounted, exposing their shielded guardian uniforms beneath their gang colors. After coming to terms with the reality, the judge's eyes widened. They had used rehabilitated individuals to infiltrate his own organization. "You picked us, your own people." Hawk stepped out of hiding. "Due to the fact that our service is unparalleled. A second chance." The judge instinctively lunged for a weapon, but Ethan swiftly disarmed him with ease. "Not going down. Not in this context." Demon Kings started to lose their hues in greater numbers. They had heard of second chances and seen success tales. Involvement in the rehabilitation program was present in some families. They could see the terrifying army crumble right before their eyes. "This is the embodiment of true strength." Ethan spoke to the other bikers. "Rather than dread and aggression, oneness. Personal preference. Change." Additionally, Pi. From her perch on the porch, with her trusty basket at her side, Martha's words resounded. "The best way to deal with change is with Pi." Anger subsided. Real laughter erupted from a number of Demon Kings. It was through the rehabilitation grapevine that they learned about Martha's renowned pies. According to Ethan, you are given an option. Remain and engage in combat with a whole community that is prepared to protect its own. If you like, come with us, he motioned to the Shielded Brotherhood. Find an improved method. The judge's authority was clearly eroding as he made a final, desperate attempt. Turncoats are considered dead. No hiding from us. Just like you pursued me. From behind the townsfolk, a fresh voice emerged. Ex-Lieutenant Drake of Shadow reappeared. "It's been weeks since I went undercover at your company. Have the proof necessary to bring your entire enterprise to its knees." Sheriff Wilson advanced with a flash drive in his hand. "This includes your ties to 3 separate criminal organizations in different states." The FBI is really intrigued. The judge's complexion turned pale. More and more riders started to change their colors. "Put your face to it," Ethan whispered. "You have completed your path. Whether or not you can adapt to new circumstances is the sole concern." Everyone in Millbrook Shielded would be talking about what occurred next for years. At the farm, approximately 150 ex-members of the Demon Kings were waiting in line to turn in their colors and enroll in rehabilitation as the sun rose over the horizon. The criminal empire of the judge and his few devoted minions crumbled under the weight of evidence, leading to their arrest without incident. Tommy painstakingly recorded the entire event on his phone. Sharing Martha's pie, a reunion of enemies. Newcomers are being assisted by townspeople in completing registration applications. Protectors of the Shielded extend a brotherly welcome to their erstwhile adversaries. "This is absolutely insane," Ghost exclaimed as she observed the unfolding events. "We used to terrorize communities like this a year ago." Instead of taking a defensive stance, Ethan offered corrections that changed both of us. Smiling, Martinez grinned as she organized the initial counseling exams. "Did you get the meaning of this? We must procure a more expansive farm." Over a transformed Shielded, the morning sun emerged. The night that was supposed to ruin their work had, in the most profound way, proved it was right. The Shielded Brotherhood had evolved into more than simply a rehabilitation program. A movement, they were. Help requests came flooding in from all over the nation as word of the events in Millbrook Shielded circulated. Communities battling gang violence, veterans organizations, and law enforcement all sought to draw lessons from their achievements. "The leadership team will require assistance," Ethan informed them. "No longer can we handle this on our own." As Martha pointed out to him, we were never truly alone. Yes, that is the main idea. The Brotherhood of the Shielded started training others and dispatching teams to neighboring towns to assist in the establishment of rehabilitation clinics. However, they held fast to their heritage. It all began on a humble farm, with the simple notion that anyone could transform their heart. Are you aware of Rachel's perspective on this whole thing? Later that evening, Ethan dared Martha to answer. As she presented him with a steamed cup of coffee, Martha beamed. What if she told her you're only at the beginning? On this, she was correct. Millbrook Shielded's makeover was only the first step. They were on the cusp of a new chapter that would have far-reaching consequences. Ethan sat with his morning coffee, gazing out over a field of flowering roses, 5 years after their first confrontation at Cooper Farm. He watched the sun rise. This original field still held a special place in the heart of the now expansive campus of hope that was the farm. It was the turning point. Where did you think I'd see you? The sound of Martha's voice resounded through the morning mist. For once, she wasn't toting a pie platter, instead, she had 2 letters. This one comes straight from the Oval Office. Next month was supposed to be the Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony, but that wasn't the reason Ethan was smiling. It was the second letter that Martha had brought with her from a Montana town. According to Martha, this was their first graduate course. 40 veterans who were formerly members of gangs. She grinned at Ethan as well. They are also cultivating roses for Rachel. After that first tumultuous night, Martha stored Rachel's heritage rose seeds, and now they symbolized change. This is the first order of business for each new rehabilitation facility. As a living reminder that encouragement, not coercion, is the key to development. The sound of motorcycles shattered the stillness of the morning, yet, the rider's attire had changed. All around the nation, people were holding on to the emblem of the Shielded Guardian, which depicted a rising sun atop crossed rose stems. After a rescue mission in Tornado hit Texas, Brick headed the convoy back to their base. Reporting the event, Brick's expression showed signs of exhaustion and pride. Together with Death Riders, former demon rulers are helping to repair dwellings. Nobody could believe it, not even the natives. By this point, the Shielded Brotherhood were bigger than any other veteran disaster relief group in the nation. Because of their track record of mending fences between communities, they were in a special position to unite people in times of distress. Shadow was instructing a class on dispute resolution at the training center. He had been released early for good behavior and was now a program graduate. As he explained to his class, strength has nothing to do with physical prowess. Who can aid in healing is the key. Ghost informed a fresh batch of combat medics that the medical program had grown to encompass mental health services, explaining that they no longer merely treated physical injuries. Even the unseen ones are healed by us. Hawk, who is currently helping the DOJ on rehabilitation programs, supplied the most recent figures. With 83 rehabilitation clinics and over 10,000 graduates, the success rate is 94%. However, the details were where the true tales of triumph lay. Similarly to Tommy, who had transformed from a timid teenager avoiding bikers into the head of the Shielded Brotherhood Youth Outreach Program, he now oversaw their anti-trafficking efforts. Tommy had previously attempted to join them as a Demon King scout. Some unexpected news was conveyed by Deputy Chen, who was just promoted to commissioner. Keeping tabs on gang territories was something we used to do. Currently, we are keeping tabs on transformation zones, which are places where alumni of Shielded Guardian are actively working to restore communities. Once a terrifying symbol, the Shielded Guardian's national training headquarters had taken over the old Steel Falcons warehouse. The walls that had previously planned bloodshed now bore the banners of triumph. There are many of images demonstrating the transformative potential of second chances. The farm had its annual community meal as night fell. Where conflicts once raged, tables now extended out across the meadows. As they shared stories of personal growth, former adversaries shared a meal. Do you know what the most effective treatment ended up being? As he observed the assembly, Dr. Martinez inquired. This group. Their sense of belonging. Goal. Yes, Pastor Roberts agreed. Our first goal was to prevent other acts of violence. It came to light that we were restoring spirits. Among the pies, Martha had, unsurprisingly, surpassed herself. Her wooden spoon had transformed from a weapon to a ceremonial instrument, but she was adamant that dessert was an essential part of any proper celebration. Ethan did something he seldom did, he stood to speak to the audience. Here on this very field, we were given an option 5 years ago. Do something different or respond violently to violent acts. Second chances are powerful, and we've decided to believe in them. He then pointed to the renovated campus in all directions. Buildings and programs weren't what we actually created, though. We created evidence. Evidence that making a change is possible at any time. That with the correct conditions, even the hardest hearts may become more pliable. Then, to everyone's surprise, Shadow got to his feet. The hard heart was me, he confessed. Imagined I was constructing an eminence. On the contrary, I was erecting a jail. Thanks to these folks, I learned how to develop superior things. Local group. Ethan took one final stroll around Cooper Farm as the sun dipped below the horizon. Through each stride, recollections were tugged. There he had initially faced the Steel Falcons. In this barn, once enemy neighbors became friends. These were the meadows where wanderers finally found rest. Hawk came over with 2 mugs of coffee and walked over to him. Do you understand my realization? This isn't the place to grow roses, frankly. We are gaining optimism. Recalling Rachel's words from a long time ago brought a smile to Ethan's face. Sometimes, the tiniest seeds bear the most fruit. Over time, the Shielded Brotherhood evolved into much more than just a group. Their very existence demonstrated the feasibility of change. That enmity could transform into kinship. Those heroes might discover fresh conflicts worthy of their blood. The belief in second chances held by one former Special Forces member was the catalyst for it all. A wooden spoon was lovingly held by a grandma. Further, some people opted to construct bridges rather than walls. Stopping violence and rehabilitating veterans weren't the only parts of the Cooper Farm narrative. It was all about reminiscing about the miraculous things that can happen when we decide to cultivate our common humanity. Each campus light represented a life changed, a broken heart restored, or a returned warrior as night descended over the Shielded, casting a celestial radiance that resembled the descent of stars into Earth. Well beyond Millbrook Shielded, the seeds of transformation had blossomed into a sanctuary of optimism. Rachel was smiling, and Ethan knew it. After they had finished their coffees on the porch, Martha joined him for a final cup. Rachel insisted there are 3 essentials for a flourishing garden. A little bit of good soil, some gentle nurturing, and, most significantly, the belief in the planting's purpose. Ethan beheld the changed Shielded below, where erstwhile adversaries now banded together to guide the lost back to safety. Indeed, she was correct. Typically, she was. Gathering her empty basket, Martha Brick rose to her feet. This place is like a little garden, if you ask me. They did, in fact. And the growth continued.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.